Marcus Thompson never thought his quiet life in the small coastal town of Cedar Bay would collide with his past as a Navy SEAL. After 12 years of classified operations across 3 continents, he had traded his tactical gear for carpenter's tools and his squad for solitude. The 34-year-old veteran had deliberately chosen this sleepy fishing village precisely because nothing ever happened here. His weathered hands worked steadily on the custom cabinets he was building for the Hendersons' kitchen renovation. The smell of cedar shavings filled his workshop, a converted garage behind his modest 2-bedroom house overlooking the harbor. Marcus found peace in the simple precision of woodworking, where measurements mattered and problems had clear solutions, unlike the gray areas that had defined his military career. The morning started like any other. Marcus arrived at his workshop at dawn, coffee steaming in his thermos, local radio playing softly in the background. He had 3 projects to finish this week, including a dining table for the mayor's wife and bookshelves for the library. The work was steady, honest, and allowed him to sleep without the nightmares that had plagued him during his first year of civilian life. Around 10 o'clock, Marcus heard voices outside his workshop. Not unusual, since neighbors often stopped by to chat or ask about his services. But something in the tone made him pause his sanding and listen more carefully. The voices were unfamiliar, urban accents that didn't belong in Cedar Bay's slow drawl. Through his workshop window, Marcus saw 3 men standing near his truck. They wore expensive suits that seemed out of place in a town where the fanciest attire was usually a clean flannel shirt. The tallest man, with silver hair and cold eyes, was examining Marcus's license plate while speaking into a phone. The other 2 flanked him like bodyguards, their jackets bulging in ways that suggested concealed weapons. Marcus's instincts, dormant but never gone, suddenly sharpened. His pulse remained steady, but his awareness expanded to take in every detail. Exit routes, potential weapons, cover positions. The tactical assessment happened automatically, muscle memory from 1,000 dangerous situations. The silver-haired man ended his call and approached the workshop door. Marcus continued sanding, appearing casual while tracking their movement through his peripheral vision. The man knocked, a polite but insistent sound that seemed to echo with authority. "Marcus Thompson?" the man asked when Marcus opened the door. His voice carried the confidence of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "That's me," Marcus replied, wiping sawdust from his hands with a rag. "You gentlemen looking for some custom work?" The man smiled, but it never reached his eyes. "My name is Vincent Carrera. I represent certain business interests that have been looking for you, Mr. Thompson. Or should I say, Senior Chief Thompson?" The use of his former rank sent a chill down Marcus's spine. Very few people knew his military background, and he had been careful to keep it that way. His discharge papers listed him as a standard enlisted sailor, with his SEAL service buried under layers of classification. "I think you had me confused with someone else," Marcus said calmly. "I'm just a carpenter these days." Carrera's smile widened. "Come now, Senior Chief. We both know that's not entirely accurate. 12 years with DEVG GRU, 3 tours in Afghanistan, 2 in Iraq, and some very interesting work in places that officially don't exist. Quite an impressive record." Marcus felt the familiar weight of danger settling around him. DEMGU, the Navy's most elite counterterrorism unit, was information that should have been locked away forever. Whoever these men were, they had access to files that even most government officials couldn't reach. "Like I said, you've got the wrong guy," Marcus repeated, his hand casually moving closer to the chisel on his workbench. Not much of a weapon, but it was sharp and he knew exactly how to use it. "Mr. Thompson, we're not here to cause trouble," Carrera said, though his companions had positioned themselves to block the exits. "We're here because of your brother." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Danny Thompson, his younger brother by 3 years, had followed Marcus into the military, but chose a different path. While Marcus had pursued special operations, Danny had become a military intelligence officer, eventually transitioning to work for a civilian defense contractor after his discharge. "What about Danny?" Marcus asked, his casual facade beginning to crack. "Your brother stumbled onto something he shouldn't have," Carrera explained, pulling out a tablet and showing Marcus a photograph. It was Danny, clearly taken without his knowledge, entering an office building in Washington, D.C. He's been asking questions, accessing files, making copies of documents that certain people would prefer remained private. Marcus studied the image, noting the timestamp from just 2 weeks ago. He and Danny spoke regularly, but his brother had seemed distracted during their last phone call. When pressed, Danny had mentioned some irregularities in a contract audit he was conducting, but he hadn't gone into details. "Danny's just doing his job," Marcus said. "He's always been thorough." "Too thorough in this case," Carrera replied, his tone hardening. "Your brother has evidence of some very lucrative arrangements between government officials and private contractors. Arrangements that certain people have worked very hard to keep quiet." The pieces began falling into place. Danny worked for Titan Security Solutions, one of the largest military contractors in the country. They handled everything from overseas logistics to intelligence analysis, worth billions in government contracts. If Danny had uncovered corruption or illegal activities, it would explain why these men had traveled to a remote fishing village to find his brother. "What do you want from me?" Marcus asked. "Your brother won't return our calls, Mr. Thompson. He's gone dark, using skills I'm sure you taught him. We need you to convince him to return the documents he took and forget what he saw. In exchange, Danny can continue his career, and you can continue your peaceful life here in Cedar Bay." The threat was clear, though delivered with corporate politeness. Marcus had seen enough of the world to know that people like Carrera didn't make social calls. They had found him because they needed leverage over Danny, and they weren't the type to accept no for an answer. "And if I refuse?" Marcus asked. Carrera's smile disappeared entirely. "Then we'll have to explore other options. Your brother has a wife, doesn't he, Sarah? And a daughter, little Emma, just started kindergarten last month. Lovely family." The mention of his niece crossed a line that Marcus had hoped these men would be smart enough to avoid. Emma was 5 years old, with Danny's curious eyes and Sarah's infectious laugh. She called Marcus Uncle Mac and sent him crayon drawings that he kept pinned to his workshop wall. "You need to be very careful about what you say next," Marcus warned, his voice dropping to a tone his former teammates would have recognized as a prelude to violence. "No threats, Mr. Thompson, just facts. The world can be a dangerous place, especially for families of people who possess sensitive information. Accidents happen. Cars malfunction. Houses catch fire. Children get lost." Marcus felt something cold and familiar awakening inside him, a part of himself that he had worked hard to bury. It was the part that had made him effective in the world's darkest corners, the part that could make hard decisions and live with the consequences. "I'll need to contact my brother," Marcus said finally. "Of course, but Mr. Thompson, please understand that time is a factor. Our employers are not patient people, and they have significant resources at their disposal. If your brother doesn't cooperate voluntarily, they will take more direct action." Carrera handed Marcus a business card with only a phone number printed on expensive stock. "You have 48 hours. Call that number when you've convinced Danny to see reason." The three men left as quietly as they had arrived, but their presence lingered like smoke. Marcus watched their black sedan disappear down Harbor Road before returning to his workshop. The peaceful morning had been shattered, replaced by the familiar tension of a mission briefing. He tried calling Danny immediately, but the call went straight to voicemail. That wasn't unusual. Danny often worked in secure facilities where personal phones weren't allowed, but given the circumstances, it felt ominous. Marcus left a message using a code phrase from their childhood that would tell Danny to call back urgently. While he waited, Marcus began making preparations. Old habits died hard, and he found himself conducting a security assessment of his property. His house had good sight lines and multiple exit routes, but it wasn't designed to withstand a serious assault. If Carrera's people decided to escalate, Marcus would need to be ready. He retrieved a duffel bag from the back of his bedroom closet, one he had hoped never to open again. Inside were items from his previous life, encrypted communication devices, emergency cash, false identification papers, and most importantly, contact information for people who owed him favors. The bag also contained his service pistol, a Sig Sauer P226 that had accompanied him through more missions than he cared to remember. Marcus cleaned and loaded the weapon with practiced efficiency, muscle memory taking over. The familiar weight in his hands brought back memories he had tried to forget. Midnight raids in Kandahar, hostage rescues in Somalia, counter-terrorism operations that officially never happened. He had been good at that work, perhaps too good. His phone rang around noon. Danny's name appeared on the screen, and Marcus answered immediately. "Mac, I got your message. What's going on?" Danny's voice sounded strained, exhausted. "Where are you right now?" Marcus asked. "Safe house outside Arlington." "Mac, I think I'm in serious trouble." "I know. 3 men just paid me a visit. They want you to return some documents and forget what you saw." Danny was quiet for a long moment. "They found you? How?" "Professional resources." "Danny, what did you stumble onto?" "Project Blackwater. It's a diversion scheme involving defense contracts worth over $200 million. High-ranking Pentagon officials have been steering contracts to specific companies in exchange for kickbacks. The money gets laundered through shell corporations in the Cayman Islands." Marcus felt a headache building. Government corruption was nothing new, but $200 million was enough to make people desperate and dangerous. Who else knows about this? "I made copies and sent them to a journalist at the Washington Herald, but she hasn't published anything yet. I think they got to her first." "Danny, these people threatened Emma and Sarah." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly 30 seconds. When Danny finally spoke, his voice had changed, becoming harder and more focused. "They threatened my daughter?" "Yes." "Mac, I need your help. I can't do this alone, and I can't let them hurt my family." Marcus stared out his workshop window at the peaceful harbor where fishing boats bobbed at their moorings. In a few hours, those boats would return with the day's catch, and the docks would fill with the familiar sounds of Cedar Bay's daily rhythm. It was a life he had grown to love. Simple and clean. But family came first. It always had. "Text me the address of your safe house," Marcus said. "I'll be there by tomorrow morning." "Mac, once you get involved in this, there's no going back. These people have connections everywhere. Government, military, law enforcement. They won't stop until we're dead or they get what they want." Marcus looked at the business card Carrera had left behind, then at his niece's crayon drawing of a butterfly pinned to the wall. Emma had written for Uncle Mac in purple crayon at the bottom, with a heart dotted above the I in Mac. "They made their choice when they threatened a 5-year-old girl," Marcus said. "Text me that address." After ending the call, Marcus began shutting down his workshop. He called his 3 current clients and explained that a family emergency would delay their projects. Mrs. Henderson was understanding, the mayor's wife was annoyed, and the librarian offered to help if he needed anything. Cedar Bay was that kind of place. Marcus packed methodically, taking only what he might need for an extended operation: clothes, toiletries, cash, weapons, and communication equipment. He also packed a photograph of Emma from her last birthday party, her gap-toothed smile bright with frosting from her unicorn cake. Before leaving, Marcus walked through his house one more time, memorizing details he might never see again. The kitchen table where he ate breakfast while watching the sunrise over the harbor. The living room where he read in the evenings, often falling asleep in his leather chair. The bedroom where he had finally learned to sleep through the night without nightmares. It was a good life, quiet and honest, but some things were more important than personal peace. Marcus loaded his truck and drove to the Cedar Bay Marina, where he kept a small boat for weekend fishing trips. The harbor master, an elderly man named Pete, who had become something of a friend, was surprised to see him. "Taking her out kind of late in the day, aren't you, Mac?" "Family emergency," Marcus explained, transferring his gear to the boat. "Need to get to Portland tonight." Pete nodded sympathetically. "Hope everything works out. Your slip will be here when you get back." Marcus hoped that would be true, but he wasn't making any assumptions. As he piloted the boat out of Cedar Bay's protected harbor and into the open ocean, he felt the familiar weight of responsibility settling over his shoulders. Somewhere ahead lay a confrontation that would determine whether his brother's family lived or died, whether justice would be served or buried, along with anyone who pursued it. The peaceful fisherman was gone. Senior Chief Marcus Thompson was back. Marcus reached the Arlington safe house at dawn, after driving through the night from Portland where he had docked his boat. The address Danny had texted led him to a nondescript apartment complex in a working-class neighborhood, the kind of place where people minded their own business and asked few questions. Danny answered the door on the first knock, looking like he had aged 5 years in the past week. His usually neat appearance was disheveled, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. The brothers embraced briefly before Danny quickly locked the door behind Marcus and activated a small electronic device that would detect listening devices. "Clean," Danny announced after checking the device. At least for now. The apartment was sparse but well-equipped for someone trying to stay off the grid. Multiple laptops sat on a folding table, external hard drives and communication equipment scattered around them. The windows were covered with thick curtains, and Marcus noticed motion sensors positioned at strategic points. Danny had been busy. "Show me what you found," Marcus said without preamble. Danny led him to the laptops, pulling up encrypted files that painted a disturbing picture. Project Blackwater was more extensive than Danny had initially described. The scheme involved not just contract fraud, but also the deliberate sabotage of competing bids, the creation of artificial supply shortages to drive up prices, and the funneling of weapons to unauthorized buyers. "It goes all the way to the Pentagon," Danny explained, pointing to organizational charts that showed the network of corruption. General Morrison in procurement, Colonel Hayes in logistics, and at least 6 civilian contractors, including Titan Security Solutions, my own company. Marcus studied the documents, his mind automatically cataloging the implications. "How deep does it go at Titan?" "Deep enough that I can't trust anyone there. My supervisor, Janet Crawford, was asking too many questions about my audit. What about the journalist?" Danny's expression darkened. "Rebecca Martinez at the Washington Herald. I sent her copies 3 days ago, but she hasn't published anything. I tried calling yesterday, and her editor said she was on extended leave. When I checked social media, her last post was the day after I contacted her." Marcus felt the familiar chill of an operation turning dangerous. Professional opposition was one thing, but when journalists started disappearing, it meant the other side was willing to cross lines that most criminals avoided. "We need to assume she's been compromised," Marcus said. "Either bought off, threatened, or worse. What other options do we have for getting this information public?" "I made multiple copies and stored them in different locations. But Mac, these people have resources we can't match. Government connections, unlimited funding, and no apparent concern about collateral damage." As if summoned by their conversation, Danny's phone buzzed with an incoming call. The caller ID showed an unknown number, but Danny had programmed the device to record all incoming calls automatically. "Answer it," Marcus said. "Put it on speaker." Danny accepted the call, and Vincent Carrera's smooth voice filled the room. "Good morning, Daniel. I trust you slept well?" "What do you want?" Danny asked. Straight to the point. "I appreciate that. Your brother and I had a very productive conversation yesterday. I'm sure he's told you about our mutual concerns regarding your recent research project." Marcus moved closer to the phone. "This is Marcus. We're both here. Excellent. Family unity is so important, don't you think?" "Daniel, we've been monitoring your communications. We know about the copies you made, the journalist you contacted, and the various storage locations you've established. Our employers are prepared to make a very generous offer." "I'm listening," Danny said. $5 million deposited in an account of your choosing. In exchange, you return all copies of the documents, sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement, and relocate your family somewhere far from Washington. Perhaps the West Coast? I hear San Diego has excellent schools for children. Marcus and Danny exchanged glances. The offer was substantial, but it also revealed how valuable and damaging the stolen documents must be. No one offered $5 million unless the alternative was much more expensive. "What guarantees do we have that you'll honor the agreement?" Marcus asked. "You have my word as a gentleman," Carrera replied. "And more practically, you have the fact that dead martyrs are much more troublesome than living expatriates. We prefer clean solutions to messy ones." "We need time to discuss this," Danny said. "Of course. But please understand that this offer has an expiration date. If we don't reach an agreement by midnight tonight, our employers will be forced to pursue more aggressive collection methods. They've already invested considerable resources in this matter." The line went dead, leaving the brothers alone with the weight of an impossible decision. $5 million would set Danny's family up for life, but it would also mean letting corruption continue unchecked. Worse, it would mean trusting people who had already demonstrated they were willing to threaten children. "It's a trap," Marcus said immediately. They'll take the documents and kill us anyway. Too many loose ends to leave us alive. I know, Danny agreed. But Mac, what choice do we have? They know where Sarah and Emma are. They could hurt them just to send a message. Marcus walked to the window and carefully lifted one edge of the curtain. The street below appeared normal, but his trained eyes picked out details that suggested surveillance. A van parked too long in one spot, a jogger who had passed by twice, a woman reading a newspaper who never turned the page. They're already here, Marcus observed. Watchers, probably armed. We're not walking out of this apartment without a fight. Danny joined him at the window, following his brother's gaze. How many? At least 6, possibly more. Professional setup, multiple overwatch positions, probably electronic surveillance as well. So what do we do? Marcus felt the familiar calm that came with accepting the inevitable. The time for negotiation and compromise had passed. Carrera's people had made a fundamental error by threatening Emma, and now they would learn why that was a mistake. We're going to give them what they want, Marcus said. All of it. You mean surrender? No, Marcus replied, checking his sidearm. I mean, we're going to give them a demonstration of what happens when you threaten a Navy SEAL's family. Marcus began moving through the apartment, checking sight lines and escape routes with professional efficiency. The building was 4 stories tall, with their apartment on the 3rd floor. Fire escapes on both ends, stairwells that could be controlled or used for flanking maneuvers, and neighboring buildings that offered potential refuge. Danny, I need you to contact Sarah and Emma. Tell them to go to the emergency protocol we discussed last Christmas. During Marcus's last visit to Danny's family, the brothers had developed a security plan in case Danny's intelligence work ever put them in danger. Sarah knew to take Emma to a specific hotel in Richmond, register under a false name, and wait for contact using predetermined signals. Already done? Danny said. They left the house 3 hours ago. Good. Now we need to level the playing field. Marcus opened his duffel bag and began removing equipment that transformed the modest apartment into a command center. Tactical radios, night vision goggles, flashbang grenades, and enough ammunition to fight a small war. The weight of familiar tools in his hands brought back muscle memory from a dozen similar situations. Mac, we can't fight the entire government, Danny protested. We're not fighting the government, Marcus corrected. We're fighting criminals who happen to work for the government. There's a difference. Marcus activated one of his encrypted communication devices and began making calls to people who owed him favors. The special operations community was small and tightly knit, bound together by shared experiences that civilians could never understand. When one of their own called for help, others responded without question. The first call went to Tom Rodriguez, a former SEAL Team 6 operator who now worked private security in Northern Virginia. The second call reached Lisa Chen, a former military intelligence officer who had transitioned to cybersecurity. The third connected him with Father Michael O'Brien, an Army chaplain who had served multiple tours and maintained contacts throughout the defense establishment. Each conversation was brief and coded, but the message was clear. Marcus Thompson needed assistance, and it was the kind of assistance that couldn't be requested through official channels. Tom will be here in 2 hours with additional equipment and backup, Marcus told Danny. Lisa is working on electronic countermeasures and will try to intercept Carrera's communications. Father O'Brien is reaching out to contacts who might be able to apply official pressure from above. And if none of that works? Marcus checked his watch. They had 14 hours until Carrera's midnight deadline, which meant roughly 12 hours of daylight to operate in. Enough time to shift from defense to offense, but only if they moved quickly and decisively. Then we take the fight to them, Marcus said. But first, we need to understand exactly who we're fighting. Danny pulled up additional files on his laptop showing corporate structures and government connections that revealed the true scope of Project Blackwater. The corruption network included 3 Pentagon generals, 2 senators, at least a dozen high-ranking civilian officials, and multiple defense contractors. The money flows through Cayman Islands accounts controlled by a shell corporation called Maritime Solutions, Danny explained. But the real power behind this is a defense contractor called Apex Strategic Partners. They've been acquiring smaller companies and consolidating military contracts for the past 5 years. Marcus studied the organizational chart, noting familiar names from his time in special operations. Several former military officers had transitioned to high-paying jobs with Apex, creating a revolving door between the Pentagon and private industry. Vincent Carrera works for Apex, Danny continued. He's their director of corporate security, which is a fancy way of saying he handles problems that require non-legal solutions. What kind of problems?
Whistleblowers who need to be silenced.
Journalists who ask too many questions. Government officials who won't cooperate. Carrera has a team of former intelligence operatives who specialize in making problems disappear. Marcus felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. The surveillance outside wasn't just about recovering stolen documents, it was about eliminating witnesses who could testify about a corruption network worth hundreds of millions of dollars. They never intended to honor any agreement, Marcus realized. The $5 million offer was just a way to buy time while they positioned assets for a permanent solution. So what's our move? Marcus looked at his brother, seeing determination replacing fear in Danny's eyes. 12 years of intelligence work had given Danny skills that complemented Marcus's combat experience. They might be outnumbered and outgunned, but they weren't helpless. We're going to do what they least expect, Marcus said. We're going to attack. The plan Marcus outlined was audacious and dangerous, requiring split-second timing and perfect execution. Instead of waiting for Carrera's people to close the net, they would use the next few hours to gather intelligence, locate the command structure, and strike at the heart of the operation. Danny, I need you to use your intelligence contacts to identify Carrera's local operational base. Somewhere they're coordinating surveillance and communications. Lisa will help you crack their electronic security. What about you? Marcus was already changing into darker clothing and checking his equipment. I'm going to thin out their surveillance teams. Can't plan an effective operation with hostile eyes watching our every move. Mac, if you go out there, you might not come back. Marcus paused at the door, thinking of Emma's crayon drawing still folded in his wallet. His 5-year-old niece believed that Uncle Mac could fix anything, and he wasn't about to disappoint her. Danny, these people made a fundamental mistake. They threatened our family and thought we would just roll over and accept it. They're about to learn why that was the wrong strategy. Marcus slipped out of the apartment using the fire escape, moving with the fluid silence that had made him effective in hostile territory. The afternoon sun created shadows that provided concealment as he began hunting the hunters who had thought they were pursuing easy prey. The war had begun. Marcus moved through the apartment complex like a ghost, using skills honed in the mountains of Afghanistan and the urban battlegrounds of Iraq. The surveillance team Carrera had deployed was professional but predictable, following patterns that Marcus recognized from his own training manuals. The first watcher was positioned in a sedan across the street, pretending to read a newspaper while monitoring the building's main entrance. Marcus approached from behind, using parked cars for concealment. A quick application of pressure to the carotid artery rendered the man unconscious within seconds. Marcus zip-tied his hands and feet, gagged him, and moved him to the trunk of his own car. The second watcher was more challenging, positioned on a rooftop with a clear view of both the front and rear exits. Marcus scaled the fire escape of an adjacent building, then crossed between rooftops using techniques he had learned during urban warfare training. The sniper never saw him coming. Within 90 minutes, Marcus had neutralized 6 surveillance operatives without firing a single shot. Each capture provided intelligence through confiscated communications equipment, revealing the scope of Carrera's operation and the location of their command center. When Marcus returned to the safe house, Tom Rodriguez had arrived with enough equipment to outfit a small military unit. The former SEAL brought tactical gear, communication devices, and most importantly, a van equipped with electronic warfare capabilities that could disrupt enemy communications. "Good to see you again, Mac," Tom said, embracing his former teammate. "Heard you needed some help with a pest control problem." "Something like that," Marcus replied. "How much did you bring?" "Everything short of air support," Tom answered, gesturing to cases of equipment. "Lisa's been monitoring their communications from her location. These guys are using military-grade encryption, but she found vulnerabilities in their network architecture." Danny looked up from his laptop, where he had been cross-referencing intelligence data with corporate records. "I found their command center. It's a private security firm called BlackRock Tactical, operating out of a warehouse in Arlington." Corporate records show it's a subsidiary of Apex Strategic Partners. Marcus studied satellite images of the warehouse on Danny's screen. The building was isolated, surrounded by open ground that would make approach difficult. But the same isolation that protected it also meant collateral damage would be minimal when they struck. "How many people inside?" Marcus asked. "Thermal imaging shows at least 20 heat signatures," Lisa reported over the radio. "Multiple vehicles, sophisticated communication equipment, and what appears to be a holding area in the basement." "Holding area? Could be for prisoners," Danny said grimly. "Marcus, what if Rebecca Martinez is still alive? The possibility that the journalist might be imprisoned rather than killed changed the tactical equation entirely. A rescue operation was far more complex than a simple raid, requiring precision and speed that left no room for error." "Tom, what's our timeline for a coordinated assault?" Marcus asked. "Give me 3 hours to position assets and run reconnaissance. We'll need to move before midnight when their next shift change occurs." Marcus checked his watch. 5 hours until Carrera's deadline, which meant their window for action was closing rapidly. But rushing would get them killed, and careful planning was what separated successful operations from disasters. "Danny, I need you to prepare everything for simultaneous release," Marcus said. "Every news outlet, every government agency that might act on this information, every social media platform that could spread it beyond their ability to contain. Already working on it," Danny replied. "Dead man's switch is configured. If we don't check in every 12 hours, everything gets released automatically." "What about Sarah and Emma?" "Still secure in Richmond. Father O'Brien has people watching them, and they know to stay hidden until they get an all-clear signal from us." Marcus felt the familiar pre-mission calm settling over him. Every variable had been considered, every contingency planned for, every team member briefed on their role. It was the same methodical approach that had kept him alive through countless operations against impossible odds. The assault began at 11:30 that night, under cover of darkness and a carefully orchestrated electronic attack that disabled Carrera's communication systems. Lisa's cyber warfare capabilities proved devastating against security systems designed to keep out ordinary criminals rather than military-trained specialists. Tom approached from the north with 2 additional former Special Operations personnel he had recruited for the mission. Their job was to create a diversion and eliminate external security, while Marcus infiltrated the building through a weakness in their perimeter defense. Marcus moved through the warehouse complex like death itself, neutralizing sentries with the quiet efficiency that had made him legendary among his peers. Each guard was taken down silently, their weapons confiscated, their communications equipment destroyed. Inside the warehouse, Marcus found Vincent Carrera coordinating what appeared to be a major operation. Maps, surveillance photos, and tactical plans covered multiple tables, while armed operatives prepared equipment for what looked like simultaneous strikes against multiple targets. "Sir, we've lost contact with the surveillance teams," one of Carrera's men reported. "Then implement Contingency Plan 3, Carrera ordered. "Full assault on the safe house. Eliminate all targets, recover the documents." Marcus realized that Carrera had never intended to honor the midnight deadline. The corruption network was preparing to solve their problem permanently, regardless of any agreements or negotiations. Danny, Sarah, and Emma would all be killed to protect a scheme worth hundreds of millions of dollars. That changed everything. Marcus activated his communication device, alerting Tom to the change in tactical situation. "They're moving up the timeline. Execute now." The explosion that followed shattered windows throughout the warehouse district. Tom's diversionary charge had been larger than necessary, but it achieved its objective of drawing attention away from Marcus's infiltration. In the chaos that followed, Marcus moved through the warehouse like an avenging angel. Years of combat experience guided his movements as he systematically dismantled Carrera's operation. Guards who had expected to prey on a helpless family found themselves facing a predator who had survived the worst combat zones on Earth. "Die, you're worthless," one of Carrera's men screamed as he charged Marcus with a tactical knife. The man had made the classic mistake of letting emotion override training. Marcus sidestepped the clumsy attack, disarmed his opponent with practiced efficiency, and used the man's own weapon to end the threat permanently. They attacked first. Marcus said quietly, more to himself than to anyone else. The justification was both tactical and personal. These men had crossed the line when they threatened Emma, and now they would face the consequences of that decision. Marcus found Rebecca Martinez in the basement holding area, unconscious but alive. The journalist had been drugged to keep her compliant, while Carrera's people decided how to handle her permanent disappearance. Marcus carried her to safety, while Tom and his team secured the perimeter. Vincent Carrera made his last stand in the warehouse office, surrounded by the evidence of Project Blackwater's crimes. Documents, computer files, financial records, and communication transcripts painted a comprehensive picture of corruption that reached into the highest levels of government and defense contracting. "You have no idea what you're destroying," Carrera said as Marcus entered the office. "This operation protects American interests overseas, provides funding for operations that Congress won't authorize, maintains stability in regions where conventional diplomacy has failed." "It's theft," Marcus replied simply. "Theft that threatened my family." "Your family? One little girl? Against the security of an entire nation?" Marcus thought of Emma's laugh, of Sarah's gentle nature, of Danny's unwavering dedication to doing the right thing regardless of personal cost. They represented everything he had fought to protect during 12 years of military service. "That little girl is worth more than your entire network," Marcus said. Carrera reached for a concealed weapon, but Marcus was already moving. The final confrontation lasted less than 30 seconds, ending with Carrera face down on the floor, surrounded by evidence of his crimes. "The Navy SEALs' Counterstrike ended everything," Tom observed as they surveyed the destruction. Carrera's entire organization had been dismantled in a single night, their personnel captured or eliminated, their evidence seized, their operations terminated. The aftermath unfolded over the following weeks with methodical precision. Danny's Deadman Switch released every document to multiple news outlets simultaneously, making suppression impossible. The Washington Herald, under new editorial leadership after Rebecca Martinez's rescue, published a series of articles that exposed the full scope of Project Blackwater. Congressional hearings followed, along with FBI investigations, Pentagon reforms, and criminal prosecutions that sent dozens of corrupt officials to prison. General Morrison, Colonel Hayes, and the civilian conspirators all faced justice for their crimes against the American people. Apex strategic partners collapsed within 90 days, their government contracts canceled, their assets frozen, their executives facing decades in federal prison. The $200 million in stolen funds was recovered and returned to the Treasury, while additional investigations revealed similar schemes throughout the defense contracting industry. Marcus returned to Cedar Bay to find his workshop exactly as he had left it. The Hendersons' cabinet still needed finishing, the mayor's wife was still impatient for her dining table, and the librarian still offered help whenever she saw him around town. But something had changed. The nightmares that had plagued Marcus's early civilian years never returned. The weight of unfinished business that had haunted his transition from military to civilian life had been lifted by the knowledge that he had protected his family and served justice one final time. Danny relocated his family to San Diego, accepting a position with a legitimate defense contractor that specialized in cybersecurity rather than weapons systems. Sarah found work at a local hospital. Emma enrolled in an excellent elementary school, and the family began rebuilding their lives far from the Washington corruption that had nearly destroyed them. Rebecca Martinez won a Pulitzer Prize for her reporting on Project Blackwater, using the experience to launch a career investigating government corruption and corporate malfeasance. She often credited her survival to the anonymous tip that led to her rescue, never learning the identity of the man who had saved her life. Father Michael O'Brien continued his ministry to military families, occasionally receiving donations from anonymous sources to support veterans struggling with the transition to civilian life. The donations always came with notes suggesting they be used to help families in need, signed only with the initials MT. Tom Rodriguez established a private security firm that specialized in protecting whistleblowers and journalists investigating corporate corruption. His company's success rate was unusually high, though clients never learned about the Navy SEAL who sometimes provided pro bono consultation on their most dangerous cases. On quiet evenings in Cedar Bay, Marcus would sit on his porch overlooking the harbor, watching fishing boats return with their daily catch. The peace he had fought to protect was still there, still real, still worth defending. His phone would ring occasionally with calls from Emma, who had resumed sending crayon drawings to Uncle Mac. She never knew that her butterfly picture had traveled with him through the most dangerous night of his civilian life, or that her innocent faith in his ability to protect the family had given him strength when darkness seemed overwhelming. The workshop behind Marcus's house continued producing furniture that would last for generations, built with the same precision and attention to detail that had characterized his military service. Customers often commented on the quality of his work, not knowing that every joint was cut with the discipline of a man who understood that some things were worth getting exactly right. The title on Marcus's discharge papers still listed him as a standard enlisted sailor, with his SEAL service buried under layers of classification. But in the quiet moments between the sound of harbor waves and the call of seabirds, Marcus Thompson knew exactly who he was and what he had accomplished. He was a protector of families, a defender of justice, and a craftsman who built things that would endure. The rest was just paperwork. Late at night, when the workshop was quiet and the harbor was still, Marcus would sometimes pause in his work and remember Vincent Carrera's last words about security and stability. The man had been wrong about many things, but he was right about one. Some operations did protect American interests and maintain stability in dangerous regions. Marcus had been conducting exactly that kind of operation when he defended his family and exposed the corruption that threatened to undermine everything he had spent 12 years fighting to protect. The difference was that his operation served the American people rather than the bank accounts of corrupt officials. In the end, that made all the difference in the world.